Hello, this is Carlos Guerrero. I am recording my final for Poli Sci 001. I'm starting off with the essay on Hamilton and the challenges he faced in sending the Constitution to the delegates and how he overcame them. So, to start, challenges he faced were, well, convincing everyone that we needed to give more power to the federal government. This is scary for a lot of people at the time. They just came off the heels of the war with the English monarchy, foreign deific power, telling them to do what they don't want to do and having no regard for what's going wrong locally, all across the ocean. So the fear of having a stronger federal government that would have, over New York when the majority of that decision happened in, let's say, Florida or somewhere near there. Massachusetts, I guess, because that was actually a colony, would rub people the wrong way, right? So we had that to go against too. But Hamilton tried his best in this opening essay to try to communicate and to try to reach out to as many people as possible by, firstly, addressing the fact that what's currently in place, thanks to the Articles of Confederation, is not working. Just flat out not working. It is leading to a federal government that is impotent. It can't really enforce any commerce between the states. It can't really enforce any, collection of taxes in the first place to be able to do anything. If a war were to break out with, say, one of the states all the way to the south, well, how the fuck are they gonna? Sorry, shouldn't cuss, but I'm gonna leave it in here. Sorry, it's like a third take already. How the hell are they going to get troops over from New York all the way to the south, right? Like, that takes money, that takes resources, that takes logistics and organization, and it just wasn't cutting it. There was no systems in place via the Articles of Confederation to facilitate a federal government being able to assist and support all of the states within it. So here's where Hamilton comes in with the Federalist Papers. This is where he tries to convince people that, no, we need to redo this. We need a constitution. We need new rules to go by. We need a new centralized idea for how we as a nation are going to be working. He starts off with Essay 1 by emphasizing that, shit's not working. We know it's not working. But we are in a very unique point in history right now. Back then, not right now, in that the people have established some level of democracy right now. So whatever is going to happen will be as a result of how the voting population feels and wants to be governed going forward. That's really rare. Typically, it's either divine right, monarch dies, new kid comes into power, and we pray that this one's a good one, or not psychotic, or a revolution happens, and then a military general will take control, or an invading power will come in, and then their king is in charge of us, and they'll, relegate a duke of theirs, and it pretty much random chance for the most part up until now. This is the first time in history where no, people are going to have a say. People are going to be able to discuss and debate and reason how should we be governed. Hamilton, in the first essay, does a really good job of exasperating this point. He posits that this is the breaking point. This is the tipping point. This is the point in history where we can decide whether societies of men are really capable of establishing good governance from reflection and choice, or whether or not we're just doomed to the randomness of whatever monarch or general or despot or revolutionary leader happens to take the keys to the crown at the time. Setting stakes pretty high. Some people might think it's fear-mongering. Technically it is, but it's also not entirely without merit. It was a very important time and very unique situation. He provides a roadmap for how to do this, and basically outlines the entirety of the Federalist Papers going forward will be the backbone supporting his arguments for the Constitution, his plans for the Constitution, and what a Constitution for the colonies, or the states rather, should look like. He proposes that the new government should be both energetic and accountable, should align with Republican principles, should parallel state constitutions, and has importance on protecting liberties of the people and their property. Yeah. Um, so yeah. He also closes it out, I believe, by calling out to the reader that, like, hey, don't worry about who is writing this. For context, every essay in here ends with a Publius, I believe, a reference to old Roman government or stories of Roman government. Basically a pseudonym, so no one knew who wrote these at the time. And he did this for a very specific reason that he outlines in the first essay, I believe in the closing remarks, where he asked the reader, don't worry about who I am. My motives are deep in my heart, and they aren't for you to see. What you should focus on are the words I'm saying, and the arguments I'm making, and whether or not they make sense to you. And if not, why not? Because, again, this is a very important time. This is a very unique time. This is when people are going to have the opportunity to vote on what they want to be ruled by. Right? So he's just emphasizing that, like, even if you don't disagree with me, the main point I want to get across here is that you are thinking very critically here. So that whatever we do end up with is via deliberate, thought out action and not random chance how they've been subjected to all this time. Okay. Whew. Sorry, need a little break there. Chug some water. Okay. Part 2. Critically analyze and explain why James Madison, in Essay 10, vehemently argued against public councils or pure democracy. A government system in which a majority, 50% plus 1, makes all the decisions, and why he utterly believed that the tyranny majority could be better controlled by a republic from a Republican form of government rather than... Sorry, I'm misturning this. But essentially, why did James Madison caution against majority rule, pure democracy? You know, every individual citizen getting an individual vote in every matter going forward. And the main reason is factions and the dangers therein. Madison describes factions as just groups of people united by a shared cause, passion, interest, what have you. You know, and he also talks about how they are kind of sewn into the fabric of what makes people people. People are communicative. People are social creatures. They want to talk with those around them. They want to work together with those around them to further their group needs, so on and so forth, so forth. But they also lead to certain downfalls and pitfalls for man. Mob rule can come about from a majority having an opinion, whether that's right or wrong, whether that opinion is right or wrong. It doesn't matter. That mob, if incited correctly, will get action done, violence or otherwise. So he warns against factions primarily in that if left to its own devices, any individual person can easily be swayed. They can be coerced via by force, by bribery, or even just local groups that want to get together and, hey Jimmy, do you not like brown people? How about we all get the non-brown people to vote together and, you know, try to vote away as many rights as they can possibly have? Yeah? This is what Madison was trying to argue against. That if in pure democracy, where every individual person has a vote, and any policy only necessarily needs 50% plus 1 of the population to be on board with it, then that 49% of the population can just get bent over backwards as much as that 50% wants. And this is where he proposes a republic. Representative democracy, where instead of directly voting on matters, a citizen would vote for representative for their area, for local areas, and then that person would ideally vote on their behalf. That one individual person would ideally be more calm-minded, less prone to any type of mob rule or corruption or any type of favoritism, because now instead of like, hey, all of us here in Pico Rivera really, really like our low tax rate, let's try to keep that going, even if it costs anyone higher taxes on our neighboring cities like Downey or Santa Fe. Meanwhile, a representative would be representing multiple cities. They'd be representing Pico, Santa Fe, Downey, and maybe even Whittier, just for example. And in that case, well, now my little group in Pico that wants to like jury rig the tax rate or whatever have you, can no longer get away with it, because that representative has responsibilities to more than just this tiny group, meaning that tinier factions will have a harder time grouping together with shared interests enough to be able to facilitate this type of malicious abuse of power. He proposes that the cure to factions in the first place there are two. One is to destroy liberty entirely, which he does not agree with. Madison does not agree with this. He is just proposing that if you want this to work, if you don't want factions to be an issue, you just rob people of their liberties. You rob them of the right to vote, and then they can't group up together, at least legislatively. But that's hyperbolic. And two is to prevent factions from acting to oppress others, to put stopgaps in place. This is where those representatives come into place. By having representatives instead of individual votes, those representatives now will encompass a wider group of people, representing a wider group of people, making it so no one in particular group can have too much of a say. This goes and scales up at the higher levels, because first you have your city, right? Then you have your county area, and then you have your county senators, or your senators across the entire state, and then all those senators relative to every other senator for every other state, right? Each of them have different priorities, different constituencies that they are responsible for, and now have to argue with other people or other groups in a shared or a level playing field, rather. So the idea is, by doing this, you are adding more stopgaps for this type of majority oppression. One thing that I like to think about is, when it comes to this, is that any individual person can be bribed, any individual person can be coerced violently or what have you, or even just like, hey, I like my property value the way it is, but if I vote in a certain way to fuck over my neighbor, but my house would be nice, they'd probably vote for themselves, right? But if you have an electorate, like you have a representative rather, that representative now is accountable to every other representative for neighboring counties or neighboring states or what have you, depending on their level. But now they are also held accountable by the people they're representing, so they have two levels of accountability fighting to keep them in check, rather than if it was a direct democracy or a pure democracy. The only people that really care if I'm getting bribed would be the federal government or whoever's counting my vote, and good luck enforcing that for every individual citizen in the United States. That's just not how that works logistically, especially coming from the Articles of Confederation, where they barely had funds to print money correctly. So that brings us to the third question. Explain how the Electoral College works in electing presidents. And to make sure, I've explained what takes place in the presidential election year. It starts at the start of the year, ends in November. I'm going to go a little further just to be safe, but I hope you don't hold that against me. So, to begin, the Electoral College consists of 538 electors. Majority of 270 electoral votes is required to elect the president. A given state has the same number of electors as it does members in Congress. One member for each member in the House of Representatives, plus the two senators. Note, it's important that these are not those same congressmen or those senators. A member of the Electoral College cannot have held or currently hold office of any kind for the sake of integrity or something else. The process in which the president is elected occurs every 4 years. It begins at the start of the year in January with primaries and caucuses. Just depends on what the state wants for their own personal means of collecting information. But to explain, primaries are state-level elections and caucuses are local party meetings where voters express their preferences amongst presidential hopefuls. Basically, either they'll vote or they'll have like a lower group town hall. You've probably seen one or the other on TV. But this is just to like start exposing parties to who are potentially going to be their nominees. Since we live in a two-party system, it's typically Democrats, Republicans, and since that splits the population in half, and our population's pretty big, these get televised and spread around, and they become the hoopla for the year. So yeah, for the first half of the year, caucuses and primaries going around and start narrowing down who is in the running. Delegates are awarded at each of these events based on results and proportionally given to certain candidates over the others. Varies depending on the state and the party, but sometimes it is proportional, sometimes it is whoever got the most votes gets all votes for that given allotment. It depends on the party, it depends on the state. Just know that it varies. Important date, at least in modern elections, is referred to as Super Tuesday, which is when a majority of states hold their primaries simultaneously. This is done in order to get a clear picture of who the frontrunner is by allocating a large share of delegates all at once. Again, this is more of a modern thing, thanks to broadcast TV, radio, television, even internet streams at this point. It's really easy to be able to tabulate all of the results of these caucuses and primaries all at the same time, so them happening on the same day means that both parties will get a very clear picture of who is in the front running all around. So that's January up until June. In July and August, the National Party Convention starts. This is where delegates formally vote to nominate their party's candidates for presidency and vice presidency. Once a candidate wins a majority of delegates, they are officially designated as the party's nominee. This is the big one. This is when parties lock in who they want to be their nominee. This is where Biden gets locked in with Kamala. This is where Trump gets locked in with, was it Pence? I forget what the last one was. Sorry. But yeah, this is when the choices for the two parties are locked in. Not necessarily who wins, just who's going against who. Who wins doesn't really start to be a thing until November. In November, on the Tuesday after the first Monday, Election Day. This is where voters cast their ballots. This is when the general public cast their ballots. Now, like we were saying before, it's not a pure democracy. Not everyone's going to have equal say or equal vote here. What they're actually doing is they get they given the choice between different slates of electorates, pretty much different electors in their jurisdiction that they're going to be voting for, that will say, okay, if you vote for this one, they're going to vote for A for president, B for vice president, C for role C, D, E. And you're basically voting for who is going to be voting for who you want anyway. That way there's a level of separation. And to keep it from that whole mob rule thing that Madison was warning about earlier. This is where the Electoral College comes in. This is what you're voting for. This is what you're actually doing on Election Day. You're voting for how your electorates are going to be voting. Or for the electorate that's going to be voting the way you want it to. At the end of the day, it gets tallied up. Typically, it's an all or nothing type of system where whoever in your electorate for your territory wins the most votes will get all the votes. So then they will vote in the way that they advertise that they would, with the entire backing of everyone in their jurisdiction. This can lead to funniness. This can lead to a president winning without technically having the popular vote, and vice versa. President losing or a candidate losing the presidency but winning the popular vote. And yeah, it's just the nature of the Electoral College. That level of separation's debated and whether or not it's necessary. I don't necessarily think it's perfect, but I do think that that fear that Madison had with direct democracy kind of needs to be addressed in some manner. So I think it did a decent enough job. So, yep, up until Election Day, that's what happens. Everything else is formalities. I was going to go a little bit over. Sorry, don't hold it against me. So, December following that, on the Monday after the second Wednesday, Electoral College votes. Each of the 538 electors meet in their state capitals to cast formal votes. One for president, one for vice president. Majority 270 wins. Once they're done, we're chilling until January 6th, where Congress convenes. They will open the box with all the votes from the Electoral College, count all the votes, and formally certify the winner of the election. This is just a formality thing, but yeah. So I believe that is the final. I hope that was to your satisfaction. I really do hope so. Thank you for the class. Thank you for the opportunity to learn. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.